warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Everyone, this is Mr. Middlepath, and inshallah you guys are all doing well. This is an elaboration on my previous video about your parents are not gods. I had a subscriber, a long-time subscriber, who said, yo, can you elaborate on that video and explain a little bit more? I need some Islamic evidences to show my family. I need to know what the Islamic evidences are that I don't have to live with my family, or I don't have to bring my wife in. And here's the thing, guys. I'm not an Islamic scholar, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to post a link to a video that you can watch on your own underneath it, because I'm a student of psychology. I've studied psychology and I've worked in the psychological field, and this is what I do. So I'm going to comment on this from a psychological perspective. But just to get a little bit of some of the proofs out of the way and all of these things out of the way, let's just think about this logically, guys. If you live with your mom, and Islamically we're allowed to have 4 wives. So if you have 4 wives, they're all going to live with your mom? Right? It kind of doesn't make sense, guys. In Islam, a wife is allowed to have her own separate accommodation, all right? And accommodation doesn't mean it has to be a separate house. Accommodation includes bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and according to most scholars, a separate entrance. Although, again, it depends on the home. But the point is that she has her own separate living space that is separate, right? She has that. And then again, going back to the idea that your mom can command your wife, I ask again logically, in Islam we have rights. So where does the mother's right to control your wife come from? Like, where did that right come from? There is no right for your mom to order your wife around. It didn't come from her, because your mom didn't marry your wife. You married your wife. So you have the right that she obeys you, right? And there's a limit, obviously, to that obedience, right? But you have the right that she obeys you, as long as it's halal and it's not something that is abusive, right? And the only reason I'm saying that, by the way, is because I heard some stuff online where people are like, yeah, if I order my wife to stand in the corner, Islamically, she has to listen to me. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, treat them fairly. And bil-ma'ruf, when in Egypt, we have a quote that says, "A'mal ma'ruf," like, be, not just be good, be reasonable, right? In what basis is it reasonable to tell someone to stand in the corner? So, no, like, anyways, moving on. The next point, and this is, I think, is a very important point, is the idea that I can't leave my parents' house. And again, I want to ask you logically, where does that come from? Are you a dog? Are you a baby? Why can't you leave your parents' home? Again, Islamically speaking, a man doesn't need his mother's permission to marry anyone he wants. A man doesn't need his father's permission to marry anyone he wants. He can marry who he wants without their permission. Again, that doesn't mean he shouldn't get their blessing. He should get their blessing, but he doesn't need their permission. Very big deal, guys. Right? So this idea that I can't leave my parents' house, it's been ingrained into us since children. This idea that my wife has to live with my mom and do what my mom says has been ingrained into us since we were children. But oil and water don't mix. All right? It kind of reminds me of a situation, and I'm going to get to the mom thing in a second. It reminds me of this guy I was watching before. I'm not going to say his name, but these Muslim red pill guys, right? They have multiple wives and they brag about it. And one guy even wrote a book talking about how you can get multiple wives and how he has 4 wives living in the same home. Fast forward a few years later, he doesn't have 4 wives. He has 2 wives and they're living in separate homes. Took everybody a while to figure out that oil and water don't mix. What do you do with oil and water? You put the oil in a separate container and you put the water in a separate container. That's how you deal with oil and water. The 4 wives are oil and water. They don't mix. Your mother and your wife are oil and water. They don't mix, because there's natural enmity and jealousy between mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, and spouses, except whomever Allah has mercy upon. But then don't get blindsided. You heard it from me. Don't get blindsided. Don't be like, oh, my mom was so nice to my wife before we got married. She was so amazing. She loves her. And then after she got married, everything switched. All right, I'm telling you, these things happen. The enmity is real. The jealousy is real. Your mother might even feel bad and might not even be able to help herself, because that's her son. My daughter-in-law, is she treating my son right? Is my son being a simp? Is my daughter-in-law making him do stuff that he shouldn't do? No, she should be serving him in everything. My son is a king. And then you get put in these very weird situations where it's like, yo, this is normal, mom. It's okay, mom. I asked her to do that. There's no need for you to get mad about this. And she's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I know women. And you're gonna end up into a very weird situation where you're gonna learn that there's nothing you can do to logically explain something to a woman who's being emotional. But what if that woman is your mom? Then there's nothing you can do. And Islam figured this out a long time ago. Going back to the Islamic proofs, name one Sahaba who got married and brought his wife in to live with his mother. Name one Sahaba who after they got married, they lived with their mom. You won't find any. And if you do find one, it'll be the exception and not the rule. Now again, we live in a day and age where everyone's situation is different. You might be really poor. And if you're poor, life must go on. You still have to get married and try and have kids, right? And maybe you all do live in the same house. Or you might be in a situation where your mom or your dad or whoever is elderly and they actually need your help. In which case, go ahead, right? That's something you talk about with your wife. Maybe your wife, before she marries you, she's like, hey, my parents need my help. I can't move too far away. If we get married, I want to stay in the same city or whatever, right? These are all things that you work out. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the vast majority of cases where it's not like that, where it's the parent wants their kid to stay because they want their kid to stay. For no reason other than that's just what the parent wants and that's what they think they're entitled to. And the kid is infantilized and stays a man-child and doesn't get to grow. He doesn't get to experience life and grow and become a man who is capable. Everyone gets hurt in this. The man gets hurt because he doesn't actually grow into becoming a man. The wife gets hurt because she doesn't have a true marital life. The mother and the father get hurt because when they need the child most and they're old and they actually need their child to take care of them, he's not ready because he's been infantilized his whole life. So take heed of this. Right? It reminds me of when I was working in the psychiatric hospital. We had an addict who kept coming back to us. And the head doctor in charge kept telling the families, don't give him a car. Stop giving him money. You're only like making things worse. And they would do it behind his back, the doctor's back, and they kept giving their kid money and the kid kept relapsing. And then in the end, I asked the doctor, like, why did they keep doing that? And he was like, because the mom she wants her son near her. She wants her son near her no matter what. And he's used the word muntakis ala hegri. Muntakis means relapsed. Hegri means on my lap. Ala hegri means on my lap. She wants him on her lap, even if he's relapsed. And I don't mean that literally, like he's laying his head on her lap. I mean that metaphorically, like a baby. As long as his head is on her lap, whether it's relapsed or not relapsed, that's what they're okay with. And keep in mind that sometimes parents might sabotage you without even realizing it. If the kid doesn't relapse and become strong, what's going to happen naturally? He's going to go away. So sometimes parents might actually do things without realizing that they're doing it. That makes it easier for the kid to not advance because they want the kid to stay. It's like this all-encompassing, choking love. And again, I don't want anyone to resent their parents for this. They certainly went through a lot of things themselves in the previous era, right? And how bad and how savage that previous era was, especially what they went through. But I still find it ironic that these parents who don't want their kids to leave are the same parents that migrated from their home countries to come to the West and left their own parents. These are the same parents that left their own parents are the same ones that are demanding that their child not leave them. So you know your own situation better. It's upon you to exercise good judgment of not leaving your parent, so forth. I'll tell you one thing that we do in Egypt, for example. You have the child, when he grows up, gets an apartment underneath or in the same building as his parents. So he can always check on them whenever he needs to. But again, situation being what the situation is, you know your situation better. But I hope that helped in that clarification. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace out.